All right, so now that we've talked about integers and absolute value, now we will be able to compare and order integers and absolute value. So this section again is going to be 1.1 integers and absolute value. Okay, so we're going to talk about comparing them. So compare and complete using, okay, now these are the big things. You have to compare complete using these symbols: less than, greater than, equal to. Okay, so we'll just mark those so we all know what they mean. Less, greater, and equal. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll do a couple examples. Let's start with the first example. Number 1. Okay, so absolute value of -2, and then we're going to put some sort of symbol in this blank, compared to -1. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's tear apart that absolute value of -2. So what's the absolute value of -2? Okay, it is +2. So +2 compared to -1. Well, which one is going to be bigger? So +2 compared to -1. The way I like to see it is, would you rather have +$2, that means you have $2 in your pocket, or -$1, that means you owe somebody $1? Well, I would rather have $2 in my pocket. And remember, the sign that you use is going to eat the number, because obviously it wants to eat whatever is bigger, okay? Let's try the second example. So number 2, the -7 compared to absolute value of 6. Go ahead and try that one on your own. Remember to break it up. Okay, so -7 is just going to stay because it doesn't have an absolute value symbol around it. So -7 compared to, and that absolute value of 6 is just going to stay 6, remember, because absolute value is always positive. So then now think again, would you rather owe somebody $7 or have $6 in your pocket? Well, I would definitely rather have $6 in my pocket. So now let's try a couple more examples that are similar. Okay, number 3. The absolute value of 10 compared to 11. All right, so what symbol do you think belongs in there? Go ahead and take a minute. All right. If you think that this symbol belongs in there, you are correct. Okay? Remember, the absolute value of 10 is +10, and you're going to compare that to 11, because 11 is just 11. Now remember, $10 in my pocket, $11 in my pocket. Even though it's $1 more, that's what I'd rather have. Okay, let's try another one. Number 4. Okay, would you rather, so here is the absolute value of -25, okay? We're going to compare that to the absolute value of 26. Okay, so go ahead, take a minute. Okay, so hopefully you said that you would rather have the 26, because the absolute value of -25 is +25, okay? And you're going to compare that to the absolute value of 26, which of course is just going to be 26, obviously positive, okay? So I would rather have $26 in my pocket than 25. Great job. Okay, so let's try our last example of this, number 5. Okay, so we're going to have 9 compared to the absolute value of negative 9. All right. So you should be looking at this, and you should be picking it apart like we did above, okay? And you should determine that you need an equal sign, okay? Remember, 9 just stays, and you're comparing that to the absolute value of negative 9, which is positive 9. Well, if I'm asked, would you rather have 9 in your pocket or 9 in your pocket, my saying is going to be equal. I'd rather have either of those in my pocket. So that would be correct. Great job. Now we can move on to ordering the numbers. Okay, so we're going to start with our first example on ordering. Now, ordering can seem like it might be a tedious process, which it kind of is the first way that I'm going to show you. If you choose to do it a different way after you completely understand it, then that is perfectly fine with me. So I wrote your problem. This is problem number 1 on ordering integers. So our first number is absolute value of 7, negative 1. So absolute value of 7, negative 1. Absolute value of negative 3, negative 4, and 4. Those are your numbers. So what I'm going to do first, the first thing that I always do is I always change the numbers into what they should be. So absolute value of 7 is positive 7. Okay? Then, sorry, messed that up a little bit. We're going to erase that. That's not right. Good thing I caught it. Okay, so the absolute value of 7 is positive 7, okay? Negative 1 just stays the same because it doesn't have an absolute value sign. The absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3. Negative 4 stays, and 4 stays because they don't have absolute value signs in front of them. Now, what we have to do is order them from least to greatest. Sorry, I did not write that. Least to greatest. Okay, so we're going to order them from least to greatest, but we have to put them back in their original form. Okay, so we will start with the least number. So the very, very smallest number, or the worst number to have, would be negative 4. That would be the worst thing to have, is negative $4 in my pocket. So that one was negative 4 to begin with. So we're going to write negative 4, comma. Okay, those are gone. Now, what is the other least number to have? Well, here it is, negative 1, comma. So those are gone, okay? And then the next smallest or worst number to have would be this positive 3 here, okay? Now, I'm going to have to rewrite that into its original form as the absolute value of negative 3, comma. Okay? Then the next one would be $4, 4. So I'm just going to write that as 4 because that's an original form. And then the best thing that we could have is right here, plus 7, but its original form is the absolute value of 7. Okay? All right, so here's our second example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a minute to go ahead and try to solve it to make sure that you get the right answer. Now remember, the step up above right here, you should probably do that first so that you can make sure you're ordering them properly, okay? So try with that step and do it down there, okay? Go ahead. Okay, so you should have the absolute values done. So the absolute value of 2 is positive 2. Negative 3 stays the same. The absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5. Because remember, absolute value is always positive. Negative 1 stays the same, and 6 stays the same. Now we're going to order them from least to greatest, going back into the original forms, okay? So let's go ahead and order them from least to greatest. The very, very smallest or worst number to have is the negative $3, okay? That was -3 up here to begin with, so we're going to write it as -3, comma. Okay, our next number that would be the worst to have is -1. Again, that's written just as -1. And then the next worst number to have is +2. That's written as the absolute value of 2. Okay? And then the next one right here, +5. So the absolute value of -5. And then our very biggest number is 6. Great job. Okay, I'm going to write another example down. And then you guys can go ahead and do this one on your own. So our third example is -12. Absolute value of -26. -15. Absolute value of -12. And 10. Go ahead and work through that problem the same way that we have been, and then you should get it ordered. When you're finished, you're going to go ahead and compare your answer to the one that I have. All right, and that's what you should have for an answer. The next thing that we're going to do is a word problem. Now, you don't have to write the entire word problem out, but I would try to get a gist of the problem so that you have it written there. All right, let's start with a word problem. It says the depth of a walleye, fish A, in a lake is 25 feet below sea level. There is a carp, fish B, swimming in the same lake that is 12 feet below sea level. Now, the first thing you should do in every single word problem is you should start highlighting the important pieces of information. So if I were to highlight anything, the first things that I would highlight is walleye and 25 feet below sea level. And there is a carp, that's our fish B, swimming in the same lake that is 12 feet below sea level. Okay? Now, if you don't understand below sea level, basically what that is you have the very, very start. So let me do a drawing here. The very, very start of our water, that's going to be our sea level. Okay, what the first part of the question is asking us to do is to write an integer for the position of each fish relative to sea level. Okay, so the first thing I like to do before I do any word problem or before I start working through any of this stuff is to draw a picture. So first we've started with our sea level. Okay, what would our sea level represent? What would be right here if we were considering this to be like a number line? We would consider it to be 0, okay? The number 0, okay? So that's starting fresh, it's 0. So if I were to draw my first fish 25 feet below sea level, if I was talking below, that would be going this way, okay? So here's my first fish. Not a very good fish drawer, you're gonna understand that sooner or later. Okay, so that's my fish A, and it says that it is 25 feet below sea level. So from here to here has to be 25 feet, okay? Or you could count it as a negative 25 feet because it's below sea level. Okay, so then my other fish is going to be, here's my other fish. Here, we're gonna start here, go this way. Okay. Just so you guys know, that was a flop of a fish, so we need to start that over. Okay, so here's my fish. Again, no judging the drawing. Okay, now that fish is 12 feet below sea level. So from sea level to the fish, negative 12 feet. Great job. So I guess we kind of already did the first part together. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to do the first part. Part A says, write an integer for the position of each fish. So, fish A and fish B. We kind of already did this in the picture. So for fish A, what would be the integer for the position? Well, fish A says it's 25 feet below sea level, which means that it's at negative 25 feet. Make sure you include the label, 25 feet. All right, great. Now for fish B is that carp, and it's 25 feet below sea level also. Okay, so negative 12 feet. Great. Okay, so now let's move on to part B. Part B says which integer that you wrote is greater. So it's probably like saying which one would I rather have. Remember when we talked about money, we would be talking about negative $25 in comparison to negative 12. So would I rather owe somebody $25 or would I rather owe somebody 12? Well, I definitely would rather owe somebody 12. So the fish that is the closest to the sea level is going to be fish B at negative 12 feet. Okay? All right, and problem C, it says, which integer in part A has a greater absolute value? So let's write the absolute values. So fish A has an absolute value of negative 25, and fish B has the absolute value of negative 12. Okay, remember, if we rewrite the absolute values, it's going to be the positive number, the number of steps. Well, fish A is 25, and fish B is 12. Therefore, fish A would have the greater absolute value. Okay? And the very last thing you'd want to do is explain the correlation between the absolute values with the depths of both fish. Now that can work out right here in your picture. You could explain that the absolute values is the distance away from zero that a number is. Same thing with your sea level of your fish. That's the absolute value that your fish are away from sea level. All right, great job with your first word problem today, and that will be a wrap-up. Thank you. Have a good evening.